And we're off. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 448, the All Dolphins podcast on this Tuesday, January 7th, 2025, which was annual end of season media session with Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel. Yes, again, because as you know by now, if you're a Dolphin fan, you should know by now that Stephen Ross announced Sunday night that both of them would be back in their same capacity. And today was the obligatory annual media session to end the season. And it was a long one, 37 minutes long, covered most of the topics. I'm sure there'll be fans out there say, who didn't ask this question or that question.
We're not tough enough. We are not tough enough.
Exactly. Why didn't you ask him how come you screwed up so bad last year? Yes, because that's exactly how questions need to be asked. Practically every tough question and question that needed to be asked was asked. And let's start with this, Dave Hyde. If I were to ask you the one comment or answer that stuck out to you would be what?
Well, to me, about mid-season, I was told guys are being late for meetings, and I wrote about it end of November, talked about it in the column. And, and Mike McDaniel talked about, he addressed it at the end of the season, that he's not going to tolerate it, basically. Things got to change. And, I asked the question, what happened this year? Why didn't you do that this year? And if at the end of the season you realize it's a serious problem, you realize it during the season too. And, and you talk about repeating mistakes. Adam Gase would put up on a whiteboard in the locker room. This was a big problem, the Adam Gase era, the players' names and the fines, the amount he was fining them. And as a point of embarrassment, Mike McDaniel gave a long answer, but at the end of it, he said, one thing I learned is you can't fine players because it really won't help. And here we are. I just felt like, wow, I've heard this answer before, and my larger point, why didn't Chris Greer correct him? He was the GM during the Adam Gase era. He was part of this era. Again, you got a first-time coach. I'm open. Everybody's got to learn. Now, these are the big leagues. There's a cost to learning on the job. But people don't pretend this is a small thing. This is culture. This is the very definition of culture, because it gets into the larger issues of professionalism, attention to detail, respecting your teammate, et cetera, et cetera. And you talk to any professional in any sport, being late repeatedly for a team meeting, for a team, it's not just one person, is a problem. So anyways, that when I think of, okay, what is my larger theme, and I wrote about it in my column that's just about finished.
Oh yeah, and I'm not keeping you from it, am I? No, because I have to write it too at some point, and I have to find a different spin because everybody's writing it, and yeah, it's a problem. And for me, one angle of it is when I reached out to folks in San Francisco when the Dolphins hired Mike McDaniel, the question was, he's obviously very, very smart. He's going to do a great job of creating and designing an offense and all that. He knows his X's and O's. Can he be a leader of men? And that's part of it. And I know there's going to be a segment of Dolphin fans who don't want to hear this, but I guarantee you this crap didn't happen with Brian Flores. And I get the part of it is part of the problem with finding players who make so much money is it means nothing to them financially, and per the CBA, there's only a certain amount you can find. Now, what you can do is you can get to like suspending a player for conduct detrimental to the team if it becomes enough of an issue. Then you get into the issue of, okay, well, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, hurting the team. If, for example, I'm going to throw out a name. I'm not saying it was him, but I'm going to throw out a name. If maybe one of the culprit was, I don't know, Tyreek Hill. If you suspend him for a quarter or something, would the embarrassment alone be enough to get the guy on track? Again, hypothetical if it's him. And then if it becomes a case of, no, he can't deal with it, then at some point you have to cost benefit of like, okay, do we need to move the guy? Because I don't care how good he is. It is setting a bad example and creating to a bad culture, which, as you mentioned, a lot of the NFL, a lot of winning in football is taking care of the small details.
Yeah, and this is a big sport. I always get back to. I'm stumbling here because I'm trying to cross sports here. Heat culture. That's a patented name. It's something heat culture, heat culture, heat culture. Oh, you hate it, you hate it. I remember I was talking to Shane Battier once. I said, "What is heat culture?" Now, this is a guy who'd been around the league. I
Yeah.
think this was 15, a very respected guy, very, very smart guy. I mean, he made his career on smarts. And he said, "I'll tell you what it is. If we say practice starts at noon at 11:59, everybody will be standing at the midcourt circle, knee braces on, shoes laced up, socks up, ready to go." And I said, "That's it?" And he goes, "You would be surprised how few teams do that." In the NBA, most teams when they say practice is starting, guys are shooting half court shots, running around, clowning around. He goes, "You want to know what culture? That's the winning culture. It's a professional culture." And that's if you're saying, okay, look, we can talk all day about backup quarterback situation and positions they need to fill, drafting 13th, and we will. I mean, that's what the offseason will be filled about. But it's going to mean nothing if they don't get this under control. If Mike McDaniel, and I was told the first thing, whenever you interview an NFL coach, the first thing you ask is, can he command a room? Can he get up in front of a team and command that team? Because as Mike said, as Adam Gase learned, you can't do it with fines. You can't do it with, calling a guy in and saying, "Pretty please, can you show up on time?" You got to command that respect from them. And to your point, Brian Flores, when I remember after the Adam Gase thing, and it was a big issue by the end of the Adam Gase era, Brian Flores came in his opening press conference and said, "I guarantee you we won't have anybody late to meetings." And I never heard it during because he was someone, if you're a player, you feared. He would he went too far. We know that. He fired a coach 4 games into 4 practices into training camp. He fired players all the time. But to the point that there has to be a measure of respect/fear that's not missing. Even in today's press conference, Greer used the phrase I'm going to get it wrong, but the idea was we're a players led team.
Yes.
And why are you a player? These players have won nothing. Why are you a players led team? You got to show them. Take them by the jersey and drag them. Don't let them a player driven team. Don't let them give the keys to them. Let them drive. They don't know where they're going. So we talk about culture, and this was a day to me to talk about culture because you got a GM who's going in his 7th year, a coach going in his 4th year. These are the big leagues. I'm all for learning on the job, but you can't be learning fundamental things like this on the job all the time. And if we're here talking about next year, they won't be around.
We shouldn't be talking about it now. I mean, I remember it's a hokey saying and all that. And tell me you didn't hear this and didn't stick to you. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, you're forgotten. That was a Brian Flores saying, and that basically, if it wasn't clear what the rules were, and then here's another thing that was completely hokey, and I know a lot of us in the media maybe made fun of it, but it speaks to paying attention to details and all that. If players committed mental mistakes in practice, what did they do? They sprinted to the wall.
That first year.
The TNT wall takes no talent over in Davie. And sometimes they had to go across like a field and a half or across 2 fields, depending on where they were, just again to go touch that wall, to drill into their heads. Let's not make those fundamental mistakes. And again, it's minor things, but minor things in a league where sometimes the talent level is similar, and I understand where if you have dominant quarterbacks, those teams are always going to be good, but there's a reason certain organizations always are good. no matter what. And the one that jumps out to me again, they made the playoffs without necessarily great quarterbacking, and they're always in the playoffs, and that's the Steelers. Uh, I mean, at some point, there's something to be said for Mike Tomlin and the way he runs things, and maybe he's tight. And I get it, they won't win in the playoffs and all that. Well, because they're not that great. What they have is a lot of talent on defense. Their talent on offense is whatever, but they always find a way to make the playoffs. So that was rather disturbing. Mentioning,
I mean, we talk about a lot of people call the team soft. That starts at the top. That you can't be soft, letting players get away with being late for meetings or calling them teammates, or which is what Mike McDaniel called the players teammates. I mean, I get what you're trying to do. Look, if you're the Florida Panthers and you're Paul Maurice, and he said this, he goes, I don't have to do a lot of work because the players do it for me. They've won a title. They've been through playoff grinds. They know what it takes to win. That's the model you want. I get what Chris Greer is saying, a player-led team. You want it to be a player-led team, but there's only few of them out there that can do that and win. And those are the ones that have the right people and know how to win. These Dolphins aren't that team.
No, and if it's going to be a player-led team and they're going to be led by Teron Armstead and Calais Campbell, that works for me perfectly fine. But then there are other players
if you're led by Tyreek Hill, I mean, come on now.
Correct.
Guy who quits in the fourth quarter. I mean, I wanted to throw up when I heard he quit in the fourth quarter. And yet they're talking, well, we had an hour conversation. I'm not going to tell you the details. Come on. Can you imagine Bill Parcells? And again, I get there's new school, old school. Can you imagine Brian Flores, guy quits on him in the fourth quarter? I don't care who it is. I mean, there's standards. There's standards. You accept and you don't accept. And I'm not saying get rid of Tyreek, but I'm saying you got to tell them where the line is.
Okay, well, since you brought that up, we're going to go through like a different bullet points of what was said during this press conference. Another one was, okay, what's the deal with Tyreek? Are the Dolphins going to acquiesce his wishes when he basically said, I'm out of here or whatever? So as Dave alluded to, oh, by the way, I'm joined today by Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. How's this for an introduction? 12 minutes into the podcast. That's how I roll, man. You get very, very good content here in terms of polish, in terms of introductions, intros, and outros. Not your spot, but it is what it is. It's the way I am. Sorry. So the question was asked again, what's the deal with Tyreek? Are they going to acquiesce his request to be moved out? And as you mentioned, Chris Greer said they had private conversations. Don't want to reveal what was said, and they had private conversations. There was nothing in terms of the nature of it. Then he was asked by Chris Perkins, your colleague at the Sun Sentinel and another regular guest on the podcast, if Tyreek backtracked, and then Chris Greer said he didn't backtrack. He also never made an official request to be traded. Well, if he didn't backtrack from saying I want out, I mean, that's kind of sort of get me out of here. It's not officially saying I want to be traded. It's not exactly saying kumbaya, let's come back and hug. I mean, so where
there shouldn't be a kumbaya hug. If you're running the team at that point, you're sitting down with Tyreek to say a couple things. One is, and you have an adult language conversation about quitting on the team in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talk about his comments after the game. Completely unacceptable. And it makes me want to vomit when you hear a guy saying he wants out. When he's making this team has done everything, bent over backwards financially, then redid his contract to make him happy, and now he wants out. And look, measure of frustration I get. He's a receiver, not getting the ball. But the larger question here, if we're talking Tyreek trade, forget him asking out. To me, there was an issue this offseason. They got two receivers, similar styles, making $60 million. They can't get the ball to them. Can that be corrected? Do you want an offense like that? I mean, Can you trade them? I mean, you look at the numbers, the salary cap numbers, trade Tyreek now. There's a chance you can trade him after June 5th. I think you take like a $14 million hit.
Mhm.
But you can't, it's just impossible now because what you would hit. And I haven't looked up Jalen Waddles, but I would assume they're similar considering he just got his new contract last summer. So again, this is the box they put themselves in, and Chris Greer has, and Brandon Shore and Mike McDaniel when they said they wanted everybody to be happy, this happy team. Um, this is the situation they put it in. But if you're asking me, forget the salary cap for the moment of this conversation, and you're saying, would you trade? I would trade one of them if I could because I just don't see how this offense works when you $60 million put to these two receivers. You got to. That's the focus of your offense if that's what you're doing. And the question is, can they get back to that focus on that in the offseason, this offseason?
Yeah, a couple of things to untangle here is, as you mentioned, I mean, Dolphins have given Tyreek everything he wanted. I mean, he won a new contract when we got traded here. They gave it to him. This year, he won a new contract. He was kind of, and this is after saying, I want to retire in Miami. I want to retire in Miami. They gave him a new contract when they didn't have to. He had 3 years left, even though it wasn't guaranteed, where they could have walked away from him this offseason. The way things are going now they can't. And if it's an issue of he's not featured enough in the offense, well, guess what? He still led the team in targets, even though he wasn't like his numbers were down. He's not going to get 1,000. Didn't get 1,000 yards. He still led the team with 123 targets. Jonnu Smith was second with 111, and part of it. So this notion that it's not like the Dolphins ignored him, he just wasn't targeted as much as he was last year, which was like in the 170s or something. It's almost like 10 targets a game. And Mike McDaniel explained that part of it is the way defenses were playing them. Well, they were not playing them that differently than they were in the years before.
Right.
And the one thing that, again, to me was this: I don't want to beat a dead horse, but he was not did not look as explosive this year running in the open field, where it almost didn't matter. He could beat the double team deep with his speed. And don't give me that crap about the offensive line can't hold the protection long enough for Tua to be able to chuck it down the field. That's BS. Because there are a lot of plays during the season where Tua had plenty of time to throw. I think part of the issue, again, he was not as dynamic and explosive. Whether it's age, I think it's more related to all the injuries that he had, and that's another issue because he's going to be 31 in March. And guess what? Wide receivers that reach that age, the body doesn't regenerate and get stronger as the years go by. It actually gets worse and goes downhill. And the other point with it's all, I'm fine and dandy with trading him and all that. A, what do you get for him right now? And B,
Well, yeah.
What's your offense? If the offense was kind of mediocre, not to mention boring, but that's a different story, was mediocre in 2024, what's it going to look like if you don't have him when he's still your best weapon? Because he did open up a lot of space. As Mike McDaniel mentioned, it's not just me talking. Mike McDaniel mentioned it when he talked about Jonnu Smith getting his big numbers because the field's so wide open because defenses play him deep, and that's also Devon Achane out of the backfield.
No, I'm with you. What is this offense? I mean, Mike talked about, they're seeing teams taking away the width of the field and the length of the field, and why? Because of him, essentially. I mean, Jalen Waddle's the second, third option on most plays, so his numbers are bound to be down this year. Um, um, the interesting thing about like Tyreek Hill is he played more plays this year than last year, a lot more plays, significantly larger number. He just didn't get
Not
the targets.
Sunday, he didn't. Sorry.
Huh? Yeah, not Sunday.
Not Sunday, he didn't.
No, but you saw if defenses want to take away somebody, they can take away somebody. Was it all that? I don't think it was all that.
No.
So, but my initial idea is something they got to wrestle with. Two players making $60 million on the outside, that they got to be the focal point of the offense, or you don't need both of them, and so that's something that Mike's going to have to decide this offseason.
No, completely agree. And again, this is the commitment the Dolphins made when they handed out all those contracts. This is the offense we want to have. The team want to have Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Waddle, and Mike McDaniel orchestrating the whole thing. So moving on to Tua, Chris Greer was asked the one comment that was interesting. Chris Greer said, "No concern at all whatsoever with the hip moving forward." Okay.
That's good news. That's good news. That's what you
Oh,
want to hear, right? I
sure. I'll
mean,
take him at his word.
we don't have a choice. I mean, medical issues are medical issues, and I'll take him at his word. I mean, um, it would have been interesting if they made the playoffs. You know, how serious was the injury then? But I mean, the larger issue is to his health. And Chris, for the third straight year, and when it wasn't a theme of the press conference this time, but for the third straight year, you heard him mention almost aside, well, if Tua hadn't missed 6 games, we were one game out of the playoffs, we would have made the playoffs. It's like, stop, don't do that. You're embarrassing yourself because the question is, why didn't you have a backup quarterback? I mean,
And,
again, these are fundamental issues. Being on time for team meetings, getting a backup quarterback. Those are something. This is the big leagues, guys. These are the things you got to take care of.
but basically, he kind of answered that question because he was asked, "Why didn't you have a better plan?" And he said that they were high on Skyler, and then B, they were in the running for some bigger name.
But
No. Well, the explanation was kind of. I almost it's one of those. You probably almost shouldn't have said it. Though we like the transparency, of course. They were in the running for a couple of bigger name players to come in and back up Tua. Um, but there was only so far they wanted to go financially because of A, cap consideration, and B, this is the one that really got me, not wanting to disturb their compensatory pick outlook. And for those not aware, the Dolphins right now projected to get third round pick for Robert Hunt, a seventh round pick, I believe, for Deshaun Elliott, and then probably a third round pick for Christian Wilkins. Although the fact that he only played 5 games we won't know this for sure until March, might push it to a fourth round pick. And if you sign what's a qualifying free agent, or I don't remember the term, it's really complicated, gang, I'm telling you. But had they signed a backup quarterback to a certain amount of money, it could have offset one of those third round picks that they didn't want to mess with. So basically that's what it came down to. And to me, if you could have had a better option, whether it be Jimmy Garoppolo or whoever else, somebody of that caliber, and stuck with Mike White and Skylar Thompson because you didn't want to lose a potential third or fourth round pick in the 2025 draft, that's bad. I'm sorry. That's just bad.
that's bad, and it was bad form to talk like that. What he's really saying is the price was too expensive. We didn't value the position. What he's saying is we didn't value that position that much, which again, we're comfortable going with Skyler. Well, you got Skyler, and you saw the backup position. What happened to the season? That was the first unraveling of the season. They could have come back, and as they said, they came back from 2-6. But yeah, what they really needed to do is just go out there, and they started that way. I thought, okay, this is going to be a good press conference. They started, we got to be better. We got to be better. It was a disappointing season, and we got to be better. And I thought, okay, that's a good way to start the opening statements. And then they just Chris unraveled into, excuses were the asides. We injuries and the backup quarterback was too much, and guys are excited to be here. And
yeah, always throwing that players will love to come here, love what they're doing with Mike and what Mike has. Players love coming here and talk about the great leadership. Free agents come here and then they rave about the leadership of Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback.
Where was the leadership? And then if
the hell would be that?
Where was the leadership? The guys are missing meetings and everything. And look, I blame Mike and Chris.
Yeah.
90% of that. That's where it's got to start. Imagine having to, in your own point of office constantly tell somebody to do their job or to, and not even do their job, just show up, on time. That's not your responsibility, and at some point, you know, it falls on deaf ears if you're a player. And so, especially when it's not coming from the guy who can take away your job. So, but it was an interesting as these things go. Not a
Oh,
lot of
I think it was, and as these things go, it was way more informative and revealing than any I can remember in recent years. Let me read the quote about Tua Tagovailoa and question from your colleague David Fronis at the Sun Sentinel. Basically, the evaluation of Tua in his first year after the contract extension from Chris Greer. For me, it was good to see his growth as a player when he was playing. I would say that the one thing that has come out of this, even this year, was the leadership part. All the players were talking about his leadership and the step he's taken. That's what the contract extension will do for you. A couple of our free agents that came and said that he's one of the best leaders they've been around for a quarterback. Like who? I'm sorry, but that's it's gratuitous, but no problem. To see where he's come from his early time here was impressive. This is the part that was interesting. That being said, he needs to be available. He needs to know how to protect himself. You're going to get hit at times. It's always going to happen, but he needs to control what he can control. He understands that. Not being available for taking chances and risk is unacceptable to us, and he knows that. That's the harshest criticism I've heard of Tua probably in 3 or 4 years, probably since Brian Flores was there. And obviously, he's completely right. But the part there, it's great to say it, and it's great that Tua knows that, except he comes back from the concussion. He takes on the Rams defender after throwing a pick. Then he does a mea culpa. Yeah, and I got to be smart in that. Then against Houston, he goes out, he's scrambling, and he basically doesn't dive and takes the hit on the hip that winds up costing him the last 2 games. So maybe he doesn't know that, or he knows that and doesn't want to adjust.
Yeah, I mean, all that's true to me. The overriding issue here is Chris Greer who picked him, knowing he had injury history, and now it's his fault that he gets hurt if he gets hurt. I mean, again, I remember asking Chris near the end of the season a couple years ago. They had 4 guys out at New England, and he came in, and to his credit, he came in after the game or maybe it was, after the game and talked about he wanted to address the questions of why the guys were missing. And I asked him, what part does health play into drafting or selecting players? And he goes, none. I don't want to base it on something that happened a year ago or 2 years ago. And I get what he's saying, but I don't get what he's saying when you look at all the health issues, repetitive health issues for players. And Tua would be exhibit A. I mean, he's small, he's not fast, he's not athletic.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he steps up to a different level where guys aren't small, they're fast. Even the linebackers and defensive tackles can outrun him. And he's getting hurt. And now it's his fault that it's not acceptable that he that he gets hit. This is what they signed up for. This is what they signed up for.
I know, and here's the thing: you make a good point there, that it's not even so much the injury with history with Tua. Well, it's a big part of it because he had more than, it wasn't just one injury. Because the overriding point I want to make here is you can't eliminate everybody who had one major injury in college. Because
I agree. Yeah.
Frank Gore, Thurman Thomas, Curtis Martin were all guys who blew out ACLs in college.
But let's look at that because I raised this issue and they brought up Frank Gore of San Francisco. I remember Mike did. Where Frank Gore was drafted at the end of the 3rd round. Correct. Curtis Martin was a 4th round pick. I'm not saying don't take him. I'm saying you got to be careful. Big investment. Teron Armstead, big investment. That was a big free agent buy, and he's going to miss half the games. Certainly all the practices. He's going to be questionable half the games. I mean, so you got to be careful what your investment is. Not that you take him; it's the investment.
Correct. But there's also compounding factors here. Like what Teron Arm said, the compounding factor is it wasn't just one injury. He had a long injury history.
Right.
Plus, he was older.
Good
So when you
point.
get
Yeah.
older injury prone player, Odell Beckham Jr. Shocker, he didn't play. And then with Tua, it wasn't just that he had more than one injury in college. He's also small, and that compounds the issue that you look at him. I remember seeing him at his first training camp, and I'm like, that dude's not built to last. I'm sorry. And this is even with you taking without taking consideration the fact that he'd had, like the hip injury, he had an ankle injury at Alabama. So it's like,
I'll even throw out his training camp the previous season when Jalen Ramsey got hurt. And I was talking to a GM, a former GM, and I said, "Man, what bad luck for him." And he looked at me and he goes, "They got him eight. He's got 8 years of hard mileage on his body. Something at some point is going to break down. It's not really bad luck. I mean, he said it is bad luck, but it's also that's something you got to expect in this league with those guys with that tread on the tire." So I mean, again, and Jalen that he played pretty much every game
he did.
for 8 years. But this is why you got to draft well, you got to develop well, you got to get guys 25, 26 in their prime, having great years. That's how you build teams.
Okay, let me backtrack and go back to the backup quarterback situation. Chris Greer said that they will revisit leave no stone unturned this offseason, explore every avenue, including the draft. I would be personally shocked if they use a first round pick on a quarterback.
I would.
You would or would not?
I would. Look, if you do your work and one's there that you really love, I would do it absolutely to protect the organization. That's just what I would do.
Oh no, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that.
I don't think they will, but I don't think they will. To your point, I don't think they will. Right.
I'm not expecting a second round pick. I was hoping. Why the hell wouldn't you take Joe Milton the third last year? And yes, as Omar used to call me, Arm Queen. When you have a guy who's got a bazooka, who can move and who's built like Josh Allen almost, why wouldn't you take a flyer on him in the fifth round instead of playing picking an edge defender who I loved in training camp, who played maybe 20 snaps on defense the entire year? That's Mohamed Kamara. Tell me you didn't see that. And again, I know it was against Buffalo's backups because they were resting everybody. If you didn't see what he did in that game on Sunday and go, whoa, this is interesting. I don't know what to tell you. There's something to be said. Yes, the quarterback position is all about more about accuracy and tangibles and all that. But when you have off the charts physical traits, that's a pretty good start too. Anyway, the offensive line, for those fans who absolutely wanted somebody in the media to ask a question to Chris Greer about, are you concerned now about the offensive line? Yes, it was asked probably, 15 minutes in. And Chris Greer was actually very good about this. He goes, because he laughed a little bit, he goes, I'm surprised it took that long for that question to come up. And basically he said the reason he wasn't concerned when he was asked is because they were coming off a season where they led the NFL in rushing average per carry, and they were number one in total offense. And then what happened, unfortunately, and then you kind of touched on this, is Chris Greer admitted that Isaiah Wynn took a lot longer to come back than they thought. And I'm going to guess they hadn't penciled in at left guard, and oops, he didn't play until the final month. And then Teron Armstead got hurt and got old. That could have been foreseen, but then Chris Greer mentioned, well, we did draft Patrick Paul to compensate that. We added Aaron Brewer. And then Ken got some bad luck at right tackle with Austin Jackson and Kendall Lamb. And he goes, but now, yes, we're going to need to invest in offensive linemen, much like we did in 2020. If you remember that year, they drafted 3 offensive linemen with Austin Jackson, Rob Hunt, and Solomon Kindley.
Yeah, look, they got 3 guards you really don't want on your roster. I don't mean even backup. You take one of them as backup, but you don't want to occupy space. You're what, 8, 9 offensive linemen. You don't want 2 or 3 of them who you don't trust if they get in the game, either because of Isaiah Wynn because of durability, or Liam and both starting guards for most of the year. You just don't want them. So, um, yeah, they're going to have to. The question is, how do they do this? How do they go out and buy one guard? They can't really draft two guards and expect both of them, unless they take them 1-2 or something. They expect both of them to.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying I think they have to get a free agent buy of somebody they know and can step in and start, and then they have a guard, a rookie guard. I mean, but how that'll be one of the questions of the offseason. Then safety. I mean, if you want to flip, they need two safeties too. And so
maybe because I asked, I didn't mean to cut you off. On the offensive line, Chris Greer made it a point to mention Andrew Meyer, who made the team as an undrafted free agent, who didn't see a snap on offense the entire year, as somebody they really like.
maybe, yeah. I mean, look, you should be able to develop a guard. And to the point of Chris Greer chuckling at the media and all that last year, my point was you need good guards, but that doesn't mean they're high investment. You should be able to take a guard, an athletic player, and develop him into, and even not an athletic, but that's that just hasn't happened. They've taken a guy they drafted at left tackle and spent a second and a third round pick on at Eichenberg, moved him to guard, and he can't play there. So, if you look at Greer's track record, he's pretty good at drafting defensive linemen, not so good at drafting offensive linemen.
That's a good point. Also done fairly well with DBs. You mentioned safety, and I asked Chris Greer point blank that the Dolphins have a ton of pending UFAs. The one who stands out is Javon Holland. So I asked how big of a priority will trying to re-sign him be? And I was looking for the catchphrase that he used with Mike Gesicki, Rob Hunt, and Christian Wilkins, which was he's earned the right to test the market, which was to me the telltale sign of they're gone. He did not say that with Javon Holland. What he did say is they had conversations throughout the summer, and once the regular season hit, they put the talks on hold. And he never really followed up with, we'll revisit that now. But the fact that he omitted that phrase leads me to believe that maybe there's some chance Javon Holland comes back. I still would say probably not likely, because I'm thinking he's going to get way more on the market than the Dolphins can afford or will want to spend. Given also,
I got to admit, the stock on Javon Holland, as I see it, way down. He did not help himself this year. He doesn't make plays. He whiffs on tackles. Once in a while, he'll do something nice. He broke up a pass that and tipped it, got intercepted in the Jets game. Very nice, but rarely. Not enough, and certainly not enough at that position if you're going to invest a lot of money in. So
I agree.
When you throw in, let's remember why the Dolphins didn't want to invest in him at the end of last year. They thought he was ready to go in the playoff game against the Chiefs.
Yep.
He didn't think he was ready to go. I'm not getting in the middle of it. I'm just saying this is what happened. And so there was a split there that never healed. But I don't see a great player. I mean, I thought you saw one at the end of his first year and parts of his second year, but since then, not making enough plays.
I agree with you. This is why no, my prediction would be that he's going to get, but for some reason there's a perception out there, and it's kind of
let's see what happens. Let's see the perception of the GMs who have to make the decision, who are watching game after game of tape of this year.
That will be the telltale sign. You're right, but I can tell you, like, national media analysts, a lot of whom get their info in the production meetings with coaches and all that, keep raving about one of the top safeties in the league. I personally don't see it. And you said you don't see it either. We shall see. I think we should close with the only other thing that came to my mind was interesting was Greer being asked about Calais Campbell, said that there was a conversation with him that he hasn't made up his mind on whether he wants to continue playing in 2025, and that if he does, Campbell said he really enjoyed his time with the Dolphins. If he hadn't, I'm not sure he would tell Greer anyway, to be honest. And then Greer told him that we'd love to have him back if he wants to play, and I would sign me up right now if he wants to come back and play. That dude was...
He's a joy. He's a great all aspects, from play on the field to how he conducted himself, to the fact that even he said, I didn't come in here saying I'm going to be the team leader, but his force of personality and saying the right things, being the pro's pro, being the Hall of Famer that he is. I mean, people gravitate in the locker room and in the media to players like that. Joy to cover. I'd be shocked if he comes back here, just from, he wanted to be traded at the trade deadline because he wanted to go to a contender. I would think the way he played this year, a lot of teams wanted to trade for him. I think one of those teams. Does he think the Dolphins are a contender? That's, I guess, and dollars and all that stuff comes into play. But
and I would add that if the Dolphins are going to turn around the culture issues, the discipline issues that they had, put that guy, like he was elected team captain this year, but elevate him even more than that. Make him like the president of the team council or whatever, and have those offenders have to answer to him. Because I kind of get the feel. Well, I kind of get the feeling that maybe that might help.
I guess play
along, Dave. Play along. Come on.
It's been a long day. Ultimately, the president of the players' council is the coach, and he's got to be the one pounding. He's got to be the one dictating policy here by force of personality, and that's going to be. Look, Mike and Chris got another year. That wasn't a certain thing, certainly for Chris, but they got another year, and they already are addressing some of the things they need to address. From starting with players being on time and the backup quarterback, fundamental mistakes this year. They're getting another year. Let's see if they can sort it out.
Well, correct, because that's the thing, is they can say the right things right now. We shall see when we see the evidence. So, but as I said, as end of season press conferences go, that actually was a good one, and certainly hope you enjoyed our recap here, our discussion on it with Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Catch his fine work at sunsentinel.com. You can catch my fine work or passable work, however you want to classify it, on my
wonderful work.
Oh, thank you, Dave. On Miami Dolphins on SI.com. Please subscribe, check your notifications. I'm toying with the idea of doing a live podcast on Wednesday night that would be heavy on Q&A. Shoot me in the comments to see if you guys would be up for that, and maybe that'll convince me. Until then, thanks, everyone.